Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unsaid Hours. I know many of you listen to these stories to relax and slowly fall asleep. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin. There is a world that most people never see. It runs alongside the ordinary world, on the same roads, under the same sky, but at different hours. 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, the hours when normal people are in their beds, with their eyes closed and their doors locked and their lives on pause until daylight comes back. The truckers are not on pause. They are out there in those hours, moving through the dark on highways that stretch for hundreds of miles without a gas station or a town or another human being in sight. They watch the mile markers go by. They drink their coffee. They listen to whatever comes through the radio. They drive. And sometimes in those long, dark hours, on those long, dark roads, they see things. Not all of them talk about it. Most of them do not talk about it. The things they see do not have easy explanations, and people with unexplained experiences quickly learn that the world is not always kind to people who report them, so they stay quiet. They do their job. They make their deliveries. They go home and they do not say what they saw on the road between here and there. But some of them talk. These are their stories. 10 of them. 10 drivers, 10 roads, 10 nights that none of them have been able to explain and none of them have been able to forget. Turn off the lights. Settle in. These are the roads you do not want to drive alone. Story 1. The Hitchhiker on Route 9. Marcus had been driving trucks for 11 years when it happened. 11 years is a long time to spend on the road, long enough to stop being afraid of the dark, long enough to stop jumping at deer on the shoulder or getting spooked by shadows in the tree line or letting your imagination do things with the shapes that headlights make in fog. 11 years teaches you that the road is the road, that the dark is just dark, that the things that look like something are almost always nothing, and that the things that are actually something are almost always explainable if you give them a moment. Marcus had given a lot of things a moment in 11 years. He had explained them all. He was a big man, solidly built, the kind of person who fills a truck cab the way it is meant to be filled. He had driven everything from refrigerated food loads to construction equipment to the kind of anonymous sealed containers that you are not supposed to ask about. He had driven through blizzards and ice storms and the kind of summer heat that makes the highway shimmer and ripple like something alive. He had driven through every state east of the Mississippi at least twice, and some of them many more times than that. He was not easily rattled. He wants you to understand this before he tells you what happened on Route 9 in November, because he knows how it sounds and he needs you to understand the kind of person he is before you hear it. He is not a fanciful man. He is not a man who makes things up. He is a man who drove trucks for 11 years and saw one thing he cannot explain and is going to tell you about it because it is true and because it happened and because some things that are true and happened deserve to be told even if no one can explain them. He was running a load from a distribution center in Ohio to a warehouse in Pennsylvania, a routine run. He had done this exact route, this exact road, this exact sequence of exits and mile markers approximately 30 times over the years. He could have driven it in his sleep, nearly. He knew where the road widened and where it narrowed. He knew which rest stop had the good coffee and which one had coffee that tasted like the cup was older than the coffee. He knew every town and every exit and every long, dark stretch of nothing in between. He left the distribution center at 10:45 at night. He had a delivery window to hit in the morning, and the run was about 4 hours, and he had done the math, and the math was fine. He had a full thermos of coffee and a peanut butter sandwich, and a podcast he had been meaning to listen to for weeks. Everything was ordinary. Everything was set up exactly the way 11 years of driving had taught him to set it up. The first 2 hours were completely normal. He made his way through the Ohio side without incident, the kind of driving that is almost meditative after enough years, the body doing the work automatically, the hands and eyes and feet all doing what they are supposed to do without requiring much conscious input. His mind was half on the podcast and half on the mile markers and partly in the background the way it always was on long night runs, just aware, just watching. He crossed into Pennsylvania a little after midnight. The road changed character, the way roads do when you cross state lines, not dramatically but noticeably. Something in the texture of the asphalt, or the quality of the signage, or just the particular way the landscape arranged itself on either side. Pennsylvania in November is a specific kind of dark. The trees are bare by then, and they line the road on both sides like rows of thin, dark fingers reaching up. And between them and the sky, you can see more than you can in summer, the bare branches giving a view of the darkness beyond that leaves on trees would block. He was about 40 minutes into Pennsylvania, running well, on schedule, when his headlights hit her. She appeared the way things appear at the outer edge of headlight range at night, which is suddenly and all at once, fully formed from the dark in a way that makes your chest tighten before your brain has finished processing what your eyes have sent it. One moment the road ahead was empty. The next moment there was a figure on the shoulder, a woman, standing at the very edge of the asphalt, toes almost at the white line, facing the oncoming traffic, which was Marcus. She was wearing a white dress. Not a white coat or a white jacket or any white garment that would make any practical sense for a woman standing on the shoulder of a Pennsylvania highway at 20 minutes past midnight November. A dress. The kind of thin white dress that belongs to summer or to weddings or to places very far from the shoulder of a 2-lane highway in the cold, dark. Her arm was out, thumb up. Marcus's foot came off the accelerator before he had consciously decided to slow down. The truck was already losing speed by the time his brain finished the sentence that started with what is and ended with that. He had the thought that no one should be out here in that dress at this hour, and then almost immediately the thought that he did not pick up hitchhikers, that he had never picked up a hitchhiker in 11 years. That company policy was explicit, and his own policy was more explicit, and that no exceptions meant no exceptions, no matter what the person on the shoulder was wearing or how wrong it was for November. He went past her, not fast. He had slowed enough that he was maybe doing 30 when he passed her, slow enough that he saw her clearly in the headlights for a full second or two. She was young. Dark hair. The white dress was not dirty, not torn, not disheveled in any way that suggested she had been in an accident or had been walking for a long time. It was clean and smooth and completely wrong for the circumstances. She was looking directly at him as he passed. He checked his mirrors the way you automatically check your mirrors when you pass someone on the shoulder, the habit of 11 years, the automatic verification that you have cleared them safely. She was still there, standing exactly where she had been, arms still out, watching his taillights. The red of the taillights reached back far enough to light her face for a moment. She was smiling. Not the kind of smile that belongs to a woman standing in the cold on the shoulder of a highway at midnight, hoping someone will stop and give her a ride. Not hopeful or relieved or even just reflexively pleasant. Something else. A smile with too much certainty in it. A smile that looked like it knew something that the person looking at it did not know. A smile that looked like the end of a sentence Marcus did not have the beginning of. He drove on. He told himself he had made the right call. He told himself that picking up hitchhikers was dangerous and against every policy he operated under, and that the dress was strange, but strange was not his problem, and she would be fine. Someone else would stop. There were probably more cars behind him. He told himself all of these things in the specific rapid way that you tell yourself things when part of you is not entirely convinced. He had been driving for maybe 2 miles when he heard the knock. He wants to be precise about this because the precision matters to him. It was not a sound from outside the truck. It was not road noise or engine noise or the sound of the load shifting in the trailer. He knows all of those sounds the way you know the sounds of your own house, intimately and without having to think about them, and this was none of them. It was a knock. From inside the cab, from behind him, from the sleeping compartment that was separated from the driver's area by a heavy curtain and that he had checked before he left the distribution center. Checked because he always checked. Because 11 years of professional driving had given him the habit of verifying the condition of his cab at the start of every run, and the sleeping compartment at the start of this run had contained his overnight bag, his pillow, his paperback, and nothing else. 3 knocks, deliberate, evenly spaced. The kind of knock that someone makes when they want you to know they are there. Marcus pulled over. He pulled onto the shoulder and put the truck in park and sat with the engine running and his hands still on the wheel. He looked at the curtain. The curtain was a heavy, dark fabric that he had hung himself, the kind that blocks light well and provides some sound dampening, and it was moving. Not the way a curtain moves from air circulation or from the truck's own vibration. Moving with the specific slow pushing quality of something pressing against it from the other side. He sat and watched it for a moment that felt much longer than it was. He is a big man who is not easily rattled. He reached back and grabbed the curtain with one hand and pulled it open in a single fast motion, the way you do something you have decided to do before you can change your mind about doing it. The sleeping compartment was empty. His overnight bag was in its place. His pillow was where he had put it. The paperback was face down on the mattress, open to the page he had been reading at the last rest stop. The compartment was the same as it had been when he checked it at the distribution center, the same as it had been for the entire run. He looked at it for a long time. He closed the curtain. He looked at the road behind him through his mirrors. The road was empty in both directions. No figure on the shoulder. No white dress visible anywhere in the reach of his lights. He sat for another minute. 2 minutes. He is not sure how long exactly. He sat and he breathed, and he let the feeling that had come up in him from the sound of the knocks go through him and settle, because that was the only thing to do with it. Then he put the truck in gear and he pulled back onto the road and he drove. He did not look in the mirrors again for the rest of that run. He has a specific policy about mirrors now on night runs, on that particular stretch of Route 9. He uses them for what they are for, checking traffic, checking clearance, the practical things. He does not look in them speculatively. He does not look in them the way he looked in them that night, that automatic checking reflex, because he has learned that some things are better not confirmed. He delivered the load. He filled out his paperwork. He drove home in the daylight. He checked the sleeping compartment when he got home. He does not know exactly what he was looking for. There was nothing there. There had never been anything there. There were his things in their places, exactly as they should have been. He tried to think about the smile, the specific quality of it, the certainty in it, the sense that it belonged to someone who knew the end of a sentence he did not have the beginning of. He has thought about it many times since, and he has not been able to figure out what the sentence was. He does not pick up hitchhikers. He never has. He never will. He has driven Route 9 many times since that night. He drives it in the same way he has always driven it, professionally and carefully and with the full attention of 11 years of experience behind the wheel. He does not look at the shoulder the way he used to. He looks at it more carefully now, much more carefully. He does not know what he is looking for. He knows he has not seen it again. He knows that is not the same as it not being there. Story 2. The Lights On. I-70. Denise had been driving trucks for 6 years when she saw the lights on. I-70, and she wants to be clear from the beginning that she is not the kind of person who sees things. She has said this to the few people she has told this story to, and she says it again now because it matters to her that you understand the frame before you hear what happened inside it. She is a practical person. She grew up on a farm in Iowa where practical was not a virtue so much as a requirement, where the weather and the animals and the machinery all demanded a clear-eyed relationship with reality, and there was no room for imagination to dress things up as something other than what they were. She carried this practicality into her driving career, and it had served her well. 6 years of night runs without a single incident, without a single moment of doubt about what she was seeing or whether it was real, until I-70 in Kansas. She was westbound on a Tuesday night in late October, running empty, heading back to the depot after dropping a load in Missouri. Running empty is different from running loaded. The truck sits lighter, handles differently, responds to the wheel in a way that feels slightly less substantial, and the difference after years of loaded runs always takes a few miles to adjust to. She had adjusted. She was cruising at a comfortable 65, the cruise control set, her left hand resting on the wheel in the way that long-distance drivers rest their hands when the road is straight and empty and the miles are just miles. Kansas at night is a particular experience. The land is so flat and so open that the sky feels different out here, bigger, pressing down with more weight somehow, the horizon in every direction farther away than anywhere else she had driven. The towns are spaced out in a way that means you can go 40, 50, 60 miles between lights, between any evidence that other people exist in the world. The highway just a ribbon of your own headlights and whatever the darkness decides to give back. She likes it, usually. She likes the open quality of it, the sense of space. She has driven this stretch of I-70 enough times that it feels like something she has a relationship with. The specific Kansas relationship between a driver and a piece of road that you have traveled so often, it knows you back. That feeling was not present on this particular Tuesday in October. She noticed the lights behind her at approximately 12:15 in the morning. She had just passed a small town, one of the ones that appears on the highway as a cluster of lights on the horizon, that grows and then passes and then shrinks back into darkness behind you. And she was back in the open stretch between that town and the next when she became aware of headlights in her mirrors. She noted them the way she always noted traffic behind her, automatically without particular attention, filed in the part of her awareness that tracked the road state around the truck the same way her body tracked its own balance, constantly and without conscious effort. Another vehicle, fine, normal. The highway belongs to everyone. She drove on. 5 miles later, she checked her mirrors in the normal rotation of checks she did every few minutes, and the lights were still there, same distance back. She noted this and moved on. Some drivers follow at a fixed distance, using the truck as a visual reference in the dark. It is a little strange but not alarming. 10 miles later, same distance. She had changed her speed twice in those 10 miles, a slight acceleration and then a return to cruise, the small adjustments you make unconsciously on a long run, and the lights behind her had made the same adjustments. Not falling back when she slowed, not surging forward when she sped up. Maintaining the distance with a precision that was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like intention. She told herself it was another trucker. Truckers do this, fall into convoy with each other at night on long, empty highways, maintaining a comfortable gap, using each other's lights as company in the dark. She had done it herself on long runs, found a vehicle ahead and settled into a comfortable distance, and just followed the lights for a while, the highway less lonely when there was something ahead of you with its taillights on. She kept driving, 15 miles, 20. The lights stayed exactly where they had been since she first noticed them. Not approximately half a mile, exactly half a mile. She started checking the mirrors more frequently now, and each time, the lights were at the same distance, with the same spacing between them that headlights have when they belong to a vehicle of a specific width, maintaining position with a consistency that no human driver could sustain without active and constant effort. She told herself it was another trucker using cruise control who happened to be going exactly her speed and had set up at a comfortable following distance and was just running. She almost believed this. Almost is the word. There is a section of I-70 in western Kansas where the highway runs absolutely straight for a long distance. No curves, no rises or dips, just flat road going west under flat sky. And on this section there are occasional turnouts, pull-offs where vehicles can stop, emergency stops or rest or just getting out of traffic for a moment. She knew this section. She knew the turnouts. She made a decision. She signaled, not because there was anyone around to see the signal, but because signaling was a habit and habits exist for reasons. And she pulled into one of the turnouts and killed her lights and her engine and sat in the sudden complete dark and silence of the Kansas night. She watched her mirrors. The lights behind her had slowed when she slowed. She could see them, still back there, still half a mile, now also stopped. The two white points of the headlights visible in her mirror against the greater dark of the highway behind. She sat. They sat. She waited for them to go past. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. They did not go past. The highway behind her was empty of any other traffic, and the lights that were stopped half a mile back were not moving, and she was sitting in a turnout on I-70 in Kansas in the dark, with something that had followed her for 20 miles and was now sitting on the highway behind her with its lights on, not moving, waiting. The silence in the cab was very complete. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear, distantly, the wind across the flat land on either side. She could hear nothing else. She did not like the quality of the waiting. There was something in it that felt deliberate in a way that traffic behind you on a highway is not supposed to feel deliberate. Traffic flows, traffic moves, traffic has its own momentum and its own business and its own destination. What was behind her did not feel like it had a destination. It felt like its destination was her. She started the engine, she turned on her lights, she pulled back onto the highway. The lights behind her pulled back onto the highway. Same distance, same precision. As if the stop had not happened. As if the 10 minutes in the dark turnout had been something they were both just waiting out. She called her dispatcher. She gave her location and her situation in the calm, professional tone of 6 years of keeping calm in difficult situations, and she asked him to send someone to meet her at the next truck stop. He said he would. She drove toward the truck stop without checking her mirrors. She pulled in. She parked under the brightest lights in the lot, close to the main building, surrounded by other trucks, surrounded by the ordinary evidence of the ordinary world. She sat for a moment, and then she got out and she looked at the highway behind her and at the lot around her. Nothing. The highway was empty. The lot had the trucks that had been there when she pulled in and no new arrivals. Nothing that should not have been there. She went inside. She drank coffee. She called her husband and talked for a while. The other driver from her company arrived and they drove the rest of the route in convoy, his truck behind hers. Lights visible in her mirror, the right kind of visible, the kind that has a face behind it that she knew. She checked her dash camera footage at the depot. She has a good dash camera, front and rear facing, records continuously in high definition. She went through the footage from the Kansas stretch, from the moment she first noticed the lights to the moment she pulled into the truck stop. The rear camera showed the highway behind her, empty. For the entire 20-some miles of footage, the highway behind her was empty. No lights, no vehicle. The turnout stop showed clearly. Her truck pulling off, sitting, pulling back on. and behind her, the entire time, nothing. She has watched this footage. She has watched it more than once. She has shown it to people she trusts. It shows nothing. She knows what she saw. These are different facts, and she holds them both. She still runs I-70. She still drives through Kansas at night. She still finds the flatness and the openness of it something close to peaceful, when it is peaceful, which is most of the time. She does not set her cruise control to exactly 65 anymore. She varies her speed now, slightly, randomly, without a pattern. She does not know if this makes any practical difference. She does it anyway. The mirrors she checks, the same as she always has. Professional rotation, every few minutes. She does not look at them for 10 minutes at a stretch anymore. She does not need to. She already knows what might be there. Story 3. The Man in the Road. Phil is 61 years old, and he has 30 years behind the wheel and 1 year left before he retires, and he tells this story at truck stop diners to anyone who will listen, and he wants you to know why he tells it. He tells it because it is true, and because it happened to him, and because in 30 years of driving, he saw one thing he could not explain, and after 30 years and 1 year left, he has decided he is done not talking about it. He sat on it for a long time. He told himself what most drivers tell themselves, that the road plays tricks at 3 in the morning, that the eyes get tired, that the brain fills in gaps with things that are not there when you have been driving for enough hours, and the sleep deprivation is deep enough, and the coffee has stopped doing its job. He told himself all of this for years, and he believed most of it, and then he decided he did not believe it about this particular thing and started telling the story. It was Arkansas, a 2-lane highway in the rural part of the state, the part where the trees come close to the road and the towns are far apart, and 3 in the morning means you might go 30 miles without seeing another vehicle. He was running a load of construction materials to a job site in the western part of the state, a job that needed the delivery before the crews started at 6 in the morning, which meant a night run, which meant Phil, because night runs were what he did. He had been driving for about 8 hours when it happened. 8 hours is a specific kind of tired, not the overwhelming tiredness of 12 or 14 hours when the body is starting to genuinely fail, but the manageable tired of long work, the tired that you have learned to function inside of, to recognize and account for. He knew his tired. He knew when it was telling him to pull over and when it was telling him he was fine to drive. He was fine to drive. He came around a long, slow curve in the road, the kind of curve that unfolds gradually so that what is ahead of you is revealed incrementally as you follow the arc. And as the curve straightened out and his headlights fell on the road ahead, he saw the man, standing in the middle of the road, not at the edge, not on the center line, in the middle of his lane, directly in his path, facing him, lit by his headlights. Phil hit the brakes. He hit them hard and immediately. The reflex of 30 years, the body's response to an obstacle in the road that predates thought. And the truck began to slow with the weight and the momentum of 30 tons, doing what 30 tons does when you apply the brakes at highway speed, which is to slow but not quickly, not the way a car slows, not the way you want to slow when there is a person standing in your lane. He had time, in the seconds of braking, to see the man clearly. He was middle-aged, average height, wearing dark clothing, which was why Phil had not seen him sooner. The dark clothing against the dark road, reducing his visibility to the point where he only appeared when the headlights were close enough to light him properly. He had no visible vehicle nearby, no car on the shoulder, no indication of how he had come to be standing in the middle of a 2-lane highway in rural Arkansas at 3 in the morning. He was looking at Phil's truck, directly at the windshield, at Phil specifically, the eye contact that happens through a windshield at night, when the headlights from the other direction light the driver's face, and the driver inside can be seen as a shape behind the glass. That kind of eye contact. The man was looking at Phil, and Phil was looking at the man, and the truck was still moving. Phil felt the braking. He felt the truck slowing. He watched the man in the road. The man did not move. He did not jump out of the way. He did not flinch. He did not raise his hands in a stop gesture or turn to run, or do anything that a person standing in the road, in the path of an oncoming truck, does when they register the truck coming at them. He stood completely still and looked at the windshield, and Phil felt the truck slow and then stop. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel and the engine still running, and looked through the windshield at the road ahead of him. The road ahead was empty, completely empty. The road ran straight ahead in his headlights for a long distance, and there was nothing on it. No man, no person, nothing on the shoulder on either side, nothing in the narrow ditches that ran alongside the road, nothing in the tree line that began about 10 feet from the edge of the asphalt. He had not hit anything. This was the first thing he verified sitting in the cab. No impact, no sound of impact, no feeling of impact. The kind of thing that you feel in a 30-ton vehicle, even when you hit something small. The vibration of it coming up through the frame. There had been no vibration. He got out of the truck. He took his flashlight, the heavy-duty one he kept under the seat, and he walked back along the road from where he had stopped to where he had first seen the man, which he estimated by the distance of the braking and what he knew about how much road 30 tons needs to stop from highway speed. He walked that distance slowly, his flashlight moving across the asphalt and the shoulders on both sides, and the ditches and the tree line. Nothing. No person. No sign that a person had been there. No marks on the road that would indicate anything other than his own tire marks from the emergency braking. He crouched and looked at the asphalt, in the flashlight beam in the place where the man had been standing, and the asphalt looked like asphalt, dark and granular and completely indifferent. He stood in the road in the dark in Arkansas at 3 a.m, and he stayed there for a while. He is not sure how long. He says it felt like a long time, but also like not very long. He was a man of 30 years of driving, and he had seen a person standing in the road, and he had braked and he had stopped, and the person was not there. He thought about what he knew. He knew what he had seen. He knew the quality of his own eyesight and his own alertness at that point in the run. He knew the difference between a tired hallucination, which he had experienced once in his career years ago, after 17 hours straight behind the wheel, and which had the quality of a dream bleeding into waking, uncertain at the edges, not quite solid. What he had seen was not like that. What he had seen was as solid and specific and detailed as anything he had ever seen on a road. He walked back to the truck. He got in. He sat for a while longer. Then he drove on because the load had to be delivered, and the job site needed it before 6, and standing on a 2-lane highway in Arkansas was not going to change what he had seen or explain it, and it was not going to deliver the load. He tells this story at truck stop diners. He orders his coffee and he wraps his hands around the mug, and he tells it plainly, without embellishment, in the same tone he would use to tell you about a difficult weather situation or a load that was awkwardly balanced. He does not need you to believe it. He believes it. That is sufficient. He says one more thing about it. Always, at the end. He says that the thing that stays with him most, more than the appearance and more than the disappearance, is the way the man was standing, completely still, completely unafraid, looking at the truck in the specific way of someone who is not worried about the truck, who has no concern about the truck that is braking toward them, as if the truck was not going to be the problem, as if the truck was irrelevant to whatever was happening. He says he does not know what that means. He says 1 year left, and then he is done with the road. He says he is ready. Story 4, The Wait Station. Ray has been driving the Pacific Northwest for 14 years. Oregon and Washington mostly, the mountain routes and the coastal highways, the kind of roads that have weather that can change in 20 minutes, from clear to dangerous wildlife that crosses without warning, long stretches of logging road where the only thing between you and the drop on one side is a guardrail that has seen better days. He is accustomed to unexpected things. The Pacific Northwest provides them regularly, freely, without apology. He has had elk on the highway and landslides blocking the road, and fog so thick he has pulled over and waited it out for 2 hours because driving in it was not an option. He has seen weather that did not match the forecast and roads that did not match the map and situations that required improvisation. He is a good improviser. 14 years has made him one. The wait station in October was not something he could improvise around. It was on a route he ran maybe twice a month, a north-south highway on the Oregon side, a route he knew well enough to know the wait stations on it, to know which ones were typically staffed and which ones had limited hours and which ones he needed to pull into and which ones he could pass with a green light if they were closed. This one was typically staffed. It had always been staffed when he had pulled in before. It had an operator in the booth and a functional scale, and the standard process. The pull-in, the weigh, the paperwork if needed, the green light, the pull-out. The open sign was illuminated when he saw it that night. He signaled and pulled in. The automatic compliance of a professional driver, not even a decision really, just the body doing what it does when the signs say to do it. He went through the approach, the scale, the stop at the booth window. The booth was empty. He looked at the empty booth for a moment, checked both sides in case the operator had stepped away from the window for a moment, looked for movement in the back of the booth where sometimes operators moved around. Nothing. The booth was empty and appeared to have been empty for a while. The chair pushed back from the window, a paper cup on the counter, no other signs of recent occupation. He called out. He has a loud voice and he is not shy about using it. Another thing 14 years of dealing with loading docks and job sites has given him. He called out clearly and waited. No answer. He waited several minutes. He tried the intercom button on the post beside his window. The intercom clicked and hummed with the specific sound of a system that is powered and functional. Then a voice came through it. He replays this part carefully when he tells it, trying to be precise about what he heard and what it meant and why it affected him the way it did. The voice said his name, not his company name, not his truck number, which is how wait stations identify vehicles in their system, not his CDL number or his DOT number or any of the identifiers that would appear in the records that a wait station would have access to from external sources, from plates or from company markings. His name, his first name, the name that his mother gave him and that the people who know him use, the name that is not on any documentation visible from outside his truck. He has thought a lot about whether there was any way the wait station could have known his name through legitimate means. He knows what information wait stations have access to. He knows what is visible on his truck and what is in their system. His name is not in their system. His name is not on his truck. His name was not spoken to anyone in his vicinity in the time before he pulled in. The voice said his name through the intercom. He sat for a moment and did not respond. Then he put the truck in reverse. He backed away from the booth window. He went back through the wait station the wrong way, the direction that vehicles do not go because going forward meant going further in, and he was not going further in. He got back onto the highway and he drove and he did not stop for a long time. He was shaking when he pulled into the next truck stop. He does not embarrass about this. He was shaking, his hands on the coffee mug, and he let them shake and he drank the coffee and he sat in the bright light of the truck stop and let the ordinary world come back around him. He reported it the next day. His company contacted the relevant authority. He was told that the wait station had been closed for renovation for 3 weeks. The power should have been off. The signs should have been dark. The intercom should not have been functional. There was no record of his truck having been logged at the station. There was no record of any vehicle having been logged at the station in 3 weeks. He has driven that route many times since. The wait station operates normally now, renovation completed, fully staffed. He pulls in when the sign says open, and he goes through the process. And the operator is there, and the intercom works, and his truck number is in the system, and everything is exactly as it should be. He does not know who was in the booth that night in October. He does not know how anyone knew his name. He has decided, after 14 years of the Pacific Northwest, giving him unexpected things and requiring him to deal with them practically and without fuss, that some unexpected things do not have practical explanations, and that the absence of a practical explanation does not make the thing less real. It happened. Someone said his name through an intercom in an empty building with no power. That is what he knows. That is enough. Story 5. The Passenger. Sandra runs Midwest routes, mostly Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, the flat industrial heartland of the country where the highways are wide and the freight is heavy and the work is steady if not spectacular. She has been doing it for 9 years. She is a solo driver, always has been, which was her choice from the beginning. She likes the solitude, likes the independence of it, likes the fact that for the hours she is in the cab, the decisions are hers, and the space is hers, and the quiet is hers. She is particular about her space. The cab is clean, organized, everything where it belongs. She does not leave food wrappers on the seat or bags on the floor or any of the accumulated debris that builds up in a cab when you spend enough hours in it. She knows where everything is and she keeps it there, and the order of the space is part of what makes the long hours in it manageable. She stopped at a rest area in Indiana at 3 a.m. on a September night. Standard stop. She needed the facilities and she needed to stretch, and she had been driving for about 5 hours, and it was time. She parked in the truck section, which was well lit and moderately populated with other trucks. The usual nighttime rest area population of drivers taking their mandatory rest or making pit stops. She went in, used the facilities, washed her hands, stretched in the way that people who sit for long hours learn to stretch. The specific movements that undo what the seat does to your back and hips. She was out in about 12 minutes. She got back in the cab. She did her brief check, the habit of 9 years. A quick scan of the cab to confirm everything was as she had left it before she started the engine. Everything was as she had left it. Her bag in the back, her coffee thermos in the holder, her phone on the dash mount, the small organizational systems of her space, all intact and correct. She started the engine and pulled out of the rest area and got back on the highway. She had been driving for about 5 minutes. She cannot identify the specific moment when she became aware of it. It was not a sudden awareness. It was gradual, the way some things are gradual, coming into your consciousness from the periphery, building slowly until it is undeniable rather than arriving all at once as a clear event. She became aware that the passenger seat felt occupied. She knew it was empty. She could see it was empty in her peripheral vision without even turning her head. The seat was there. The same gray fabric she had looked at for 9 years. No person on it, no bag on it, nothing on it except the seat itself. Empty in every visible way, and yet the air in the cab felt different on that side. Not dramatically different, not cold or thick or any of the things that stories about these things often describe. Just different. The specific different of a space that has a presence in it that it did not have before. The way a room feels different when someone has walked in, even if you have not yet turned around to see them. She has thought about how to describe this many times, and she keeps coming back to the same word, which is wait. The passenger side of the cab had a different weight to it than it had had before the rest area stop. Not physical weight, something else that she only has the word wait for. She drove. She did not look at the seat. She looked at the road, which was her job, and she kept her hands on the wheel and her foot on the pedal, and she drove, and she let the awareness of the presence sit alongside her and did not engage with it. She drove for 10 minutes this way. Then she made a decision. She speaks about this decision with a matter-of-factness that she has clearly rehearsed because she knows it sounds odd, and she wants to get through the sounding odd part quickly to get to the part that she thinks is actually important, which is what happened after. She spoke out loud to the empty seat. She said in a clear and level voice, "I do not know what you are or what you want, but this is my truck and I need you to leave." She said it firmly. She is clear about the tone. Not frightened, not angry, not aggressive, firm. The tone she might use to tell a coworker that a meeting needed to end or to tell a delivery dock worker that the paperwork was not complete. Clear and professional and not open to negotiation. The weight went away immediately. She cannot describe it as anything other than immediately, between one moment and the next. The difference in the passenger side of the cab was gone. The air was the same on both sides. The seat was empty in the normal way. That empty means no presence rather than just no visible person. She drove the rest of the run in the ordinary way, solo in the ordinary sense. Arrived at the depot, did her paperwork, went home. She tells this story when it comes up, which it does sometimes in the specific conversations that happen between drivers who have been doing this long enough to have accumulated things they do not know how to explain. She tells it straightforwardly and without apology. She says the part she thinks about most is not what was there. It is that it left when she asked it to, that the asking worked. She has no framework for why asking would work. What kind of thing responds to being asked to leave by leaving? What the rules are for an interaction like that? She has thought about it and she does not have answers. She has the fact that she asked and it left. She finds this, on balance, reassuring. She is a practical woman. The road requires practical people. Story 6, mile marker, 231. Thomas has been driving the eastern seaboard for 18 years, the I-95 corridor mostly, the long spine of the East Coast that runs from Maine to Florida and carries more freight than most people realize. The constant invisible movement of goods that keeps the region functioning, and Thomas has been part of that movement for nearly 2 decades. He is an observant man. This is a professional requirement, not a personal quirk. Driving requires attention, and attention over 18 years becomes a finely tuned instrument. The ability to notice things at speed, to register changes in the environment before they become problems, to see what is actually there rather than what you expect to see. He has this skill in the way that people who have practiced something for a very long time have it, automatically and without effort, just the way his eyes and his mind work now. He noticed mile marker 231 because of the lights. Not the first time he passed it. The first time he passed it going north at approximately 2:15 in the morning, he noticed nothing unusual. The marker was the same green and white of all the markers, the number clearly visible in his headlights, the reflective coating doing what reflective coating does. He noted his position and drove on. He passed it going south 6 hours later in the early morning light. Nothing unusual. He passed it going north again the following week at night. And this time, something was different. As he drew level with the marker, not before, not after, exactly at the marker, his headlights dimmed. Not significantly, not enough to matter in terms of his visibility or safety. A brief reduction in output, a flicker that lasted maybe half a second and then was over. He noted it automatically and thought about his electrical system for a moment. and then moved on because his electrical system had been recently serviced and was functioning correctly, and the flicker did not repeat itself that night. The next time he passed marker 231 going north at night, it happened again. Same thing, same moment. As he drew level with the marker, the lights dimmed briefly and then returned to full output. Half a second. He noted it more consciously this time, checked his gauges, found nothing wrong. The truck was fine. Over the following weeks, passing the marker became a kind of experiment, the kind that a naturally observant person runs automatically without deciding to run it. He watched for the dimming, and it happened each time he passed the marker going north at night. Going south, it did not happen. During the day, it did not happen. Only northbound, only at night, only at the marker. He mentioned it to other drivers who ran that stretch. He was careful about how he mentioned it, not as something strange, not with any suggestion of what he thought it meant, just as an observation. Did anyone else notice anything about the lights at mile marker 231 on the northbound side? He mentioned it to maybe a dozen drivers over the course of several weeks. 3 of them said yes. One said his headlights did something there. One said he always felt cold at that marker, even in July with the cab heat on, a brief cold that passed as quickly as it came. One said his radio lost signal there every time for about 10 seconds, regardless of what station he was on or how strong the signal had been. 4 drivers, same marker, 4 different things. He went to the trouble of looking up the history of that stretch of road. He is not sure what made him do this. Some combination of the accumulation of data points and the particular stubbornness of an observant person who has noticed something and cannot let the noticing go unresolved. He searched accident reports for that section of highway, filtered by mile marker. He found one, 3 years and 4 months, before the first time he noticed the lights. A truck, northbound, at mile marker 231, 2 in the morning. Single vehicle accident. The cause listed was driver fatigue. The driver did not survive. He sat with this information for a while. He does not make a direct claim about what it means. He is an observant man, not a fanciful one, and he understands that a correlation between an accident and an unexplained phenomenon at the same location is not an explanation of either thing. He knows this. He also knows that the lights dim every time he passes that marker going north at night, that other drivers experience their own versions of something at that marker, and that a man died there 3 years ago at 2 in the morning. He has changed his route. He runs a different corridor now, a parallel route that adds about 40 minutes to his runs, but does not pass mile marker 231. He made this change not because he is frightened, he says, but because he is respectful. He thinks there is a difference, and he thinks the difference matters. He thinks some places on the road remember things. He thinks the memory deserves to be left alone. He leaves it alone. Story 7. The radio Kevin drives tankers. Chemical loads primarily, the kind of freight that comes with extra regulation and extra training and extra responsibility, the kind where your attention cannot drift even for a moment because the thing you are carrying does not forgive moments of inattention. He has driven tankers for 12 years. He has a record that his company is proud of and that he is quietly proud of. 0 incidents, 0 violations, 12 years of delivering dangerous materials safely to the people who need them. He is precise. His logs are exact. His pre-trip inspections are thorough. He does not miss things. He has never been able to explain the radio on the Louisiana run. He runs through Louisiana 4 or 5 times a year, a route that takes him from a refinery on the Texas side down through the Louisiana coast and back up again. A familiar enough route that he has his preferred rest stops and his preferred fuel stops and the radio stations he likes in the different sections of it. His radio is a good one, fitted to the truck by the company, regularly maintained. the kind of reliable equipment that does not malfunction in interesting ways. It gets the stations he sets it to, and it stays on them, and it does not do unexpected things. At 3 in the morning on a run through rural Louisiana in late November, his radio started changing stations. He noticed it first as the sound changing. One moment a sports radio station he had been half listening to, then a click and something different, country music, then a click and static, then a click and oldies. He looked at the display. The numbers were changing, cycling through the dial, not the gradual drift that happens when you lose a signal, and the radio searches for the next strongest one. Clicking, deliberate, fast. His hands were on the wheel. The controls were set. He had not touched the radio. He turned it off. He reached forward and pressed the power button, and the radio went off, and the cab was quiet. The cab was quiet for about 5 seconds. Then the radio turned itself back on. He looked at it. The display was lit. The power button glowed. He pressed it again. Off. 5 seconds. On again. He turned it off a third time. He pressed the power button with the specific firmness of someone who wants to be clear about their intention, and he held it for a moment, and then released it, and the radio was off. 3 seconds. On again. He left it on. The changing stopped. The radio found a station and stopped cycling, the display settling on an AM frequency, and the sound that came through his speakers was old music, the kind that AM stations play late at night for the people who are awake and need something other than silence and news. A song he did not immediately recognize. Then he recognized it. It was a song his mother had played when he was growing up. Not a famous song, not something you would encounter accidentally on the radio with any frequency. A specific song from a specific era that his mother had loved and played often enough that he had grown up with it as part of the background of home. He had not heard it in years. He had not thought about it in a long time. His mother had died the previous spring. He sat in the cab and the song came through the speakers, and he let it. He did not try to rationalize it in the moment. He did not reach for the rational explanation, the coincidence of the station and the song, the mechanical malfunction that happened to produce this particular result. He let all of that go, and he listened to the song. It was not a long song, 3 minutes, maybe a little more. It played through to the end, and when it was over, the radio changed back to the station he had set, his preset station, his choice, as cleanly and completely as if a hand had turned the dial back. He drove in silence for a while after. He thought about his mother. He thought about the kitchen she had played that song in, the specific quality of afternoon light in that kitchen, the way she had moved around it while the music played. He thought about the last time he had seen her, and the last conversation he had had with her, and all of the ordinary things he had not said, because he had assumed there would be more time to say them. He drove through Louisiana and thought about his mother, and the radio did not do anything unusual for the rest of the run. He says he does not think it was frightening. He is consistent about this, that the word frightening is the wrong word for what it was. He says it was the opposite of frightening. He says he knows how this sounds in the context of a story about a radio turning itself on and changing stations on a highway at 3 in the morning, and he does not care how it sounds, because the truth of it is that he sat in the cab and heard his mother's song and felt something he has not been able to name, but that he knows was not fear. He still runs Louisiana. He always turns the radio on when he crosses the state line. He does not have a reason he can explain. He does it anyway. Story 8. The Deer. Angela has been driving rural Midwest routes for 11 years, and she knows deer the way that anyone who has driven those roads at night knows deer, which is with a specific and earned respect for their capacity to appear suddenly and without warning at the absolute worst moment. She has had close calls. She has had deer freeze in her headlights and had to brake hard, and she has had deer that she was certain were going to be a very bad situation that somehow stepped back at the last second. She has the relationship with deer that night drivers on those roads develop, alert and wary and deeply familiar with the specific behavior patterns of an animal that does not understand highways and makes unpredictable decisions. She knows deer. What she saw at the edge of the tree line in Minnesota at 1 in the morning in August was not a deer. It was deer-shaped. She acknowledges this, and she is precise about it. The initial impression at the distance and speed at which she first registered it was of a deer. The right general size, the right general posture standing at the edge of the tree line in the way that deer stand. The slight forward lean, the head position, the reflective quality of the eyes catching her headlights. She was close enough for the initial impression to shift into something else. The proportions were wrong. She was still approaching when she identified this, the specific wrongness of the proportions, and she has thought many times since about how to articulate it to people who were not there. The closest she can get is this. Imagine you know what a deer looks like in enough detail that you would notice if the proportions were changed. Longer legs relative to body, a different relationship between the height at the shoulder and the height of the head, the way the mass is distributed. She knew deer well enough that the wrongness of this one's proportions was visible to her, the same way a wrong word in a familiar sentence is visible immediately and without having to analyze why. She went past it at highway speed. She did not slow down. The thought of slowing down came into her head and was overridden by something else, something more instinctive than thought. The same thing that makes you accelerate away from something rather than toward it when the something is wrong enough. She checked her mirror. The thing was still at the tree line. She could see it in the red of her taillights, and in the taillight red, she could see it more clearly than she had in the headlights, and what the taillights showed her was its height. It was too tall. Standing at the tree line in the posture of a deer, the same posture she had seen from the front, but now she could see the full extent of it, and a deer does not stand that tall, not even close to that tall. The height was wrong by a factor that could not be accounted for by the angle or the distance or the light. It was watching her truck go. She turned away from the mirror. She called her husband. She called him on the hands-free, which she does not usually do at that hour because he wakes up groggy and worried, and she does not like to worry him. But she called him and she talked to him about ordinary things for the next 2 hours of the run, the specifics of what the kids had been doing that week and what they were having for a family dinner on the weekend. She got home and whether the younger one had shown any more interest in the soccer camp they had discussed. She talked about ordinary things and she drove and she did not look at the tree lines the same way for the rest of that run. She runs that route still. She has thought about changing it and decided against it on the principle that changing routes because of something she cannot explain would mean changing routes every time she encountered something she could not explain. And she has encountered several things she cannot explain over 11 years, and she would run out of routes. She watches the tree lines the same as always. She is just more specific about what she is watching for. Story 9. The Convoy. This account comes from 3 drivers reported separately, consistent in every significant detail. George, first driver of the convoy, has been driving for 22 years. He is a methodical person, the kind who keeps meticulous records and whose logs are always accurate and complete, because in 22 years he has seen what happens when records are not accurate and complete, and he has no patience for it. The second driver in the convoy that night was a woman named Carol, 16 years behind the wheel, George's colleague and occasional convoy partner on long I-40 runs. The third driver was a man named Bart, 8 years driving, the newest of the 3, the one who had been added to the convoy for the New Mexico leg of the run, because the company liked to have 3 trucks on certain loads, and he was available. They were westbound, loose convoy formation, about a quarter-mile between each truck, the standard spacing for convoy travel on an open highway. 2 in the morning, I-40 through New Mexico, the desert highway under the desert sky, the flattest and most open driving any of them did on a regular basis. George saw the hazard lights at approximately 2:10 in the morning. A vehicle on the right shoulder, hazard lights blinking, the orange pulse of them visible for a long distance on a straight desert highway. He noted it, moved slightly left, the standard courtesy pass. He did not stop. They had a schedule, and the vehicle on the shoulder showed no signs of being in distress beyond being stopped, and if the occupant needed help, they would call for it. He passed it and watched Carol pass it in his mirror, saw her make the same slight left move. He watched Bart's truck approach the stopped vehicle. Bart did not move left. He did not adjust his position at all. He passed the spot where the vehicle was stopped without any change in his line or his speed. The way you drive past a clear, empty shoulder, George called on the radio. He asked Bart if he had seen the vehicle on the shoulder. There was a pause that George describes as slightly too long. Not a suspicious pause, just a pause that suggested genuine consideration rather than an immediate answer. Bart said he had not seen a vehicle. He said the shoulder had been clear when he passed that section. Carol confirmed immediately that she had seen a vehicle. She described it. Sedan, she thought, dark-colored, hazard lights on, appeared to be parked rather than broken down in a way that suggested sudden stopping. 3 drivers. 2 of them saw a vehicle. 1 did not. They pulled over, all 3, and talked about it first on the radio, and then in person on the shoulder, standing in the dark with the desert on all sides and the night sky above them in that particular New Mexico way that makes the sky feel like an event rather than just a backdrop. They compared observations. George and Carol's descriptions matched. Bart was quietly firm that the shoulder had been empty. They drove back. This is the detail that George emphasizes when he tells this story. They actually drove back to verify. He is a methodical person. He was not going to leave this unresolved if resolution was possible. They drove back to the section where the vehicle had been, and they examined the shoulder with their flashlights and their headlights. Nothing. No vehicle. No marks in the dirt of the shoulder that would indicate a vehicle had been there. No tire marks turning off or on. Nothing. They filed informal reports, not official ones. There is no official mechanism for filing a report that says 2 of us saw something and 1 of us did not, and when we went back there was nothing there. The informal file at their company for I-40 anomalies already existed when they submitted their account. It contained several similar reports from that stretch of highway. George has thought about this many times. He is a methodical person, and methodical people do not enjoy unresolved things. He has tried to construct an explanation that accounts for all the facts. 2 drivers seeing a vehicle, 1 driver not seeing it, no vehicle present when they returned. He has not been able to construct one that satisfies him. He runs I-40 regularly. He watches the shoulders. He notes what is there. He is a methodical person. It is what methodical people do. Story 10, The Last Run. Daniel retired 14 months ago after 32 years of long-haul trucking that he describes as the best work of his life, and also the hardest, and also the loneliest, and also the most honest, by which he means that the road does not pretend, does not perform, does not arrange itself for your comfort or your convenience, just is what it is, and asks you to meet it as it is. He met it as it was for 32 years. He drove in weather that grounded planes and on roads that closed the next day, and through landscapes that he found beautiful, in the specific way of things seen repeatedly over long years. the way that repeated seeing adds layers to a thing rather than flattening it. He chose his last run carefully. This surprised the people at his company, who had assumed he would simply finish out his last scheduled run, and that would be that. But Daniel requested a specific route for his last run, a route he had driven many times over the years, through a valley in a particular state. He does not say which state, which valley, keeping this detail private in a way that feels protective of something, as if naming it would change it, that he had always loved. He loved it for the way it looked in early morning light. He had seen it in every season and in every kind of weather, and he had always found something in it that he could not name but that he recognized as important. The specific landscape resonance of a place that you have a relationship with. He drove to the valley on his last run. He arrived at the approach to it at about 3:30 in the morning, earlier than he wanted, the light still a long way off. He drove slowly through the first part of it, the section where the highway follows the valley floor, the mountains on either side rising into the dark, and he thought about 32 years, what 32 years of roads and miles and loads and nights had added up to. He saw the truck at the far end of the valley, ahead of him going in the same direction, running lights on. He registered it as another truck on the highway, which is what trucks on highways are, and he maintained his distance and his speed, and settled into the comfortable habit of convoy proximity, the other truck's taillights as company in the dark. But as he drove further into the valley and the light very slowly began to suggest itself at the eastern edge of the sky, the truck ahead of him became more visible and more strange. It was old, genuinely old, not older model, but old in the way of something from a different era entirely. The shape of it wrong for the current decade, the lines and proportions of a truck from decades ago, from the beginning of his career or before his career, a style of truck that did not exist on commercial highways in running condition anymore. He drove with it for several miles. He watched it as the sky lightened. He is a careful observer and he describes it carefully. The shape of the cab, the style of the running lights, the curve of the fenders, all details that placed it in a specific period of trucking history that was long past. The light came up. It came up the way it comes up in the mountains fast once it starts. The sky going from dark to gray to something almost luminous in a short time as the sun clears the eastern peaks. The light reached the valley floor. The truck was gone. He drove through the space where it had been. The road was empty ahead of him, the valley visible now in the morning light, the highway running through it clear and straight and unoccupied. He had not seen it turn off. He had not seen it accelerate away. It was there, and then, in the transition from dark to light, it was not. He drove the rest of the run in the morning light and delivered the load and completed the paperwork and handed in his keys and shook hands with the people at his depot who had arranged a small farewell, and then he drove home in his own car and he was retired. He has thought about the truck many times in the 14 months since. He is not a person who assigns easy meaning to things, not the kind of person who reaches for the comfortable interpretation without examining it. But he keeps arriving at the same place when he thinks about it, which is that the road which he had driven for 32 years and which he believes has a nature that goes beyond asphalt and signs and mile markers, showed him something on his last run. He thinks it showed him where he came from. He thinks the old truck was the road's way of pointing at the beginning, at the era when he had started, at what this work had looked like when he first came to it. He thinks the road knew it was the last time. He thinks roads remember. He thinks 32 years is long enough to be remembered. He misses the road. He says this without any ambivalence, without the relief that some retired drivers express about being done with the hours and the isolation and the physical demands. He misses it, the early mornings, the miles, the specific dark of the highway at 3 in the morning when you are the only light on it. He says the truck in the valley was real. He says goodbye back. 10 stories, 10 roads, 10 nights. The highway runs through the dark while most of the world sleeps, carrying its loads, marking its miles, holding what it holds in the long stretches between the lights. The drivers who know it best, who have spent the most time in those dark miles, will tell you that the road is longer than any map suggests, that it has a depth to it that you only access after enough hours and enough nights, that the things that happen in the dark out there do not always have the kind of explanations that work in the daylight. They keep driving. The road keeps going. The dark between the mile markers holds what it holds. You are not on that road tonight. You are safe. You are in the ordinary dark of a night with nothing unusual in it, in a place that knows you and holds you without asking anything from you. Let the highway go. Let the mile markers pass without you tonight. Close your eyes. The road will be there in the morning. For now, rest. Sleep well. There is something else about Thomas and mile marker 231 that he did not mention at first, that he added later when he had been talking for a while and had gotten comfortable enough with the telling to include the parts that he had initially decided to leave out. He says that on the last night he drove that stretch, the night before he called the company to request the route change, he pulled over at the marker. He does not know why he did this. It was not a planned stop. He was making good time, no reason to pull over, no mechanical issue, no fatigue that required a break. He just found himself slowing down and pulling onto the shoulder at mile marker 231 and sitting there with the engine running and his hands in his lap. He sat for maybe 5 minutes. He says the quality of the silence at that marker was different from the silence at other places where he had pulled over on that highway. Not louder or softer. Different in a way he keeps coming back to the word texture for, that the silence had a different texture, something in it that was not the blank silence of empty road, but the silence of a place that has something in it that is simply not making sound at the moment. He says he spoke out loud. He does not say exactly what he said, keeping this part to himself, but he says he acknowledged the accident that had happened there and acknowledged the person who had died there and said something about that, something simple and direct, the kind of thing you say at a graveside when you did not know the person but you are there, and it seems right to say something. He sat for another moment after that. Then he pulled back onto the highway and drove on. The lights did not dim as he passed the marker. He checked. He was watching for it, the habitual watch that he had developed over months of passing it, and it did not happen. He went past the marker and his headlights stayed full and strong and even, and he drove on and the marker was behind him, and it was just a marker. He does not know what this means. He changed the route anyway, out of respect, as he said, and he has not passed the marker since, and he does not know if the dimming stopped after that night or whether it only stopped for him. He thinks there is a difference between those two things. He thinks it matters which one it was. He does not have a way to find out, and he has decided he does not need one. Some things deserve to be left where they are. Kevin has one more thing to say about the radio and Louisiana and the song his mother used to play. He says that the month after it happened, back home, he called his sister. He and his sister are close, but they do not talk as often as they should. The ordinary failure of busy adult lives to maintain the connections that matter, and he had not called her since their mother's funeral. He told her about the radio. He told her carefully, the way he tells it now, giving her all the specific details so she could make of it what she chose to make. He told her about the station changing and the song starting, and the feeling of sitting in the cab in Louisiana at 3 in the morning listening to the song that their mother used to play. His sister was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had been thinking about their mother that same night. She remembered the night specifically because it had been the night she had finally cried properly. The real grief that had not come yet in the weeks after the funeral, that had been held back by the busyness of arrangements and family and all the things that fill up the space right after a loss, and that eventually, when the space clears, comes through. She had sat in her kitchen late at night, and she had finally cried, and she had thought about their mother for a long time. Kevin cannot prove that these two things are connected. He is a precise man who has worked with dangerous materials for 12 years, and precision is his professional religion. The difference between a correct number and an incorrect one being potentially the difference between a safe delivery and something much worse. He knows the difference between what he can prove and what he believes. He cannot prove it. He believes it. He believes his mother, who had loved that song and had played it in the kitchen of the house he grew up in, had found a way to reach two of her children on the same late night, each in their own way, each in the language that made sense for them. His sister in her kitchen, him on the highway in Louisiana. He turns the radio on when he crosses the Louisiana state line, just in case she has something else to say. He is listening.